y'all? So today I'm gonna be looking and reading through a few pages of this book that I got while in France. It is called Ring of Bright Water by Gavin Maxwell. I got it secondhand from the Shakespeare bookstore. I didn't go into the bookstore planning on getting a book. I don't really gravitate towards a lot of modern books. When I do read books, a lot of times they're philosophical, self-help, along those lines. But I found this one. They had a nice little secondhand portion, and it kind of called out to me. So I've been chipping away at it, and I would just like to kind of read through it and go through my thought process and what I take away from it. So far, it's been a lot of appreciating the smaller things in life. I'll read you the preface real quick. This book is about my life in a lonely cottage on the northwest coast of Scotland, about animals that have shared it with me, and about others who are in my only immediate neighbors in a landscape of rock and sea. In writing this book about my home, I have not given to the house its true name. This is from no desire to create mystery. Instead, it will be easy enough for me, for the curious, to discover where I live. But because identification in print would seem in some sense a sacrifice, a betrayal of its remoteness and isolation, as if by doing so I were to bring nearer its enemies of industry and urban life. But the name is of a little consequence, for such bays and houses are scattered throughout the wild sea lochs of the Western Highlands. If you want to escape from the rat race, as most of us do from time to time, this is the book for you. It is, to my mind, one of the most delightful books of our day. It will teach you, amongst other things, how to furnish a cottage for nothing, and how to live with an otter, 5 gray-legged geese, and a wild cat, with killer whales and stags as your neighbors. If that is to say, your cottage is on a remote beach in the Western Highlands, where you may select your furniture from the flotsam and jetsam washed up by the sea. And if, more important still, you have strength of character necessary for life with otters. Mr. Maxwell found Mige, his first otter companion, somewhere in the marshes of the Tigris, and after a series of dramatic episodes brought it back to his cottage at Camusfiera. Mige is the central character of this remarkable book, but his successor, Edel, is hardly less enchanting, and the whole tale is set against a Western Highland background, described with sharply evocative observation and understanding. The excellent photographs which illustrate it, and the brilliant drawings by Michael A. Orton, Peter Scott, and Robin McEwen add greatly to our pleasure, but fundamentally it is the unsentimental yet profoundly felt quality of Mr. Maxwell's writing which creates for us in the Ring of Bright Water so memorable of an experience. I got this stamped by the bookstore, so that's pretty cool. It was a cool place. Like I said, so far, reading through it, you really get the sense of peace and wonder that Maxwell felt when coming to this cabin, living in the cabin. I like how they mentioned the escape of rat race, because I feel like a lot of humans get caught up in the rat race that is based off of ego and, how much success can we have in this life. And you forget to appreciate the small things when it comes to connections, wants, needs, desires. and coming back to yourself and really looking at what you do have, even as far as your identity, is so important to be at peace in this life. So I'm just going to read a few pages and ramble, but this is page 30. The ravens and hooded crows, though they will peck out the eyes of a living lamb or deer calf as if he is weak, are in fact awful feeders for the greater part of the time. The hoodies spent much of their time about the shore in the late summer and midwinter, opening mussels by carrying them up to house height and dropping them to smash on the rocks. But at most other seasons of the year, there are routine harvests for them to gather elsewhere. In the back end of winter, when the ground is as yet unstirred by spring, the old stags that have wintered poorly grow feeble and die in the snowdrifts, and the gray scavengers squawk and squabble over the carcasses. A little later, when the first warmth comes and the hinds interrupt their gazing to turn their heads and nibble irritably at their spines, the hoodies strut and pick around them, gobbling the fat warb grubs that emerge from under the deer hides and fall to the ground. When the lambing season comes, they quarter the ground for the afterbirths, and then from there on, there are eggs and the young of every bird lesser than themselves. Of my human neighbors, the McCannons, I have so far said little. Callum Murdo McCannon is always given both his Christian names, for there are so many Callum McCannons in the district that Callum alone would be ambiguous. There are so many Murdos as to make that name by itself ineffective too. And there are so many Murdo Callums, which is the true sequence of his names, that to retain his identity he has had to invert them. This was a common practice under the clan system, and is still the general rule in many parts of the West Highlands, where the clan names still inhabit their old territory. Sometimes he was inebriated to Callum the Road, in the same way I have known elsewhere a John the Hearse, or a Duncan the Lorry, or a Ronald the Shooter, or a Ronald Donald the Dummy. The last not in any application upon his human reality, but because he was dumb. But the necessity for this strict taxonomy is a strange situation for one whose nearest neighbor other than myself is 4 miles distant. Callum Murdo, then, is a small, wiry man in the middle age who, when I first came, had for long been the road mender, responsible for several miles of a single-track road on either side. It might be expected that a Highlander living in this remarkable isolation would have few topics of conversation beyond the small routine of his own existence. One would not, for example, expect him to be able to quote the greater part of the Golden Treasury, to have read most of the classics, to have voluble and well-informed views on politics, national and international, or to be a subscriber to the New Statesman. Yet these were the facts, and I fear it must have been a sad disappointment to Callum Murdo to find his new neighbor, of a supposedly higher education level, to be on many subjects less well-informed than himself. He would impart to me much fascinating and anecdotal information on a host of subjects, and would close every session with a rounded formula. And now, Major, an educated man like yourself will be sick of listening to the haverings of an old pro. Over a period of 10 years, he has contributed much to my education. With Callum Murdo's wife, Morrig, a woman of fine drawn iron beauty, softened by humor, I found an immediate common ground in a love of living creatures. One reads and hears so much at secondhand of the spiritual descendants of St. Francis and St. Cuthbert, those who experience an immediate, intimate communication with bird and beast, and whom wild things feel no fear. But I have never encountered one of them in the flesh until I met Morrig, and I had become a little skeptical of their existence. what little success I myself have with animals is due, I think, solely to patience, experience, and conscious effort to put myself in the animal's position. But I do not think that any of these things have been necessary in Morag. She frankly finds more to like and to love in animals than in human beings. And they respond to her immediately as if she were one of themselves, with a trust and respect that few of us receive from our own kind. I want to stop right there. His description of Morag is very touching. I think that going back to what he said about Morag finding more trust in animals than human beings, I think that is fascinating because we, as human beings, when we enter rat races or just get caught up in day-to-day life, I think a lot of people skew their morals, they skew their values, and kind of become darker versions of themselves. And that can lead to distrustful actions. And those who are aware of that, through people I've met, they go to animals because there's this innate trust or intuitive feeling that animals feel towards people with good intentions. I feel and have noticed the same thing with children or the elderly, like people who have innate trust and good intentions, who are very real, and they don't get caught up in that rat race. Those people are a lot of times the same people who will click well with animals, children, elderly. They have an intuition and or primal instinct that creates that trust out of thin air. And it's very telling, who is good, and these are light terms, but who is good and who is bad. I find myself in this period of my life keeping my circle small. I find myself surrounded, since I've been practicing that, by good people. That's not to say I'm never wrong about people. I'm still learning, but through all things considered, those are the kind of common denominators is, this, maybe this person wasn't good around animals, kids, elderly, or maybe animals, kids, elderly didn't like them. And fast forward now, I would, I maybe wouldn't have questioned that as much at the time, but now I'm kind of like, oh, that's a little bit of a alert for me. I think that small things like that can show who's around you. And it's very subliminal, but when you pay attention to those things and to who's around you, and in those smaller instances where you learn to be more observational, it can kind of save you the time in the long run. And so, yeah, I've been practicing that and being more in intentful about who is around me, and just making sure that I'm having people around me who are good for me, uplifting for me, because that's who I am. And as much as I would love to be that for everybody, I am one person. And as somebody who likes uplifting others, if you don't have people who do the same to you, it creates a drought in yourself. And making sure that you are being watered when you're watering others is so important, in self-care, in spirituality, all of it. That it's a long conversation, but all that to say, it's very important. So I like how Maxwell described Morg in that instance, and it was interesting, very interesting, that he was like, I didn't believe that they were real at first. So he's gone his whole life, right, in this rat race, and then chooses isolation and meets this couple that are too hard to believe, because he hadn't seen that peace, that love, that primal intuitive trust that is in all of us, if you recognize it. But he had never seen that because he was around ego, pride, money, whatever. If y'all find this on digital, because I know it's probably hard to find in bookstores because it's old. But again, Ring of Bright Water by Gavin Maxwell. Start reading it. I want to start reading pages here and there on this channel and just expanding my thoughts. Highly suggest it. It'll change your perspective on a lot of things in this life, and hopefully bring peace to it as well. Until next time.